Good morning, everybody. Welcome back, Core Use Bloody History. So, first thing I need to do right off the bat is I need to apologize to my listeners at Bloody History World War II. This week in particular, actually a little more than a week, I have been engrossed in this biography of Lee Harvey Oswald. And it's honestly been consuming all of my time. I am absolutely back to doing 10, 12-hour days on research. And it's exhilarating because this work of John Armstrong, while it's got holes in it and it has flaws, I cannot see how he got this thing wrong in the big picture. Meaning, there was most certainly numerous Oswalds, seemingly post-1940. I would say 1947. But in my research, I've come to understand that the first address anomaly that we have is in 1946. We have no explanation for these address anomalies in 1946. There was no CIA in 1946. Army intelligence wasn't doing this kind of stuff in 1946. Our intelligence apparatus was really not overly developed back in this day, back in 46 and before that. And if you want to get serious about intelligence, really, there's only one intelligence agency that could have possibly had a hand in this pre-47, and that's naval intelligence. And honestly, that's something that Ryan Dawson has been telling me for years, is that naval intelligence was behind Oswald. He's not an advocate of the duplicate Oswald theory because he won't look at the evidence. He just refuses to. But nonetheless, he has always told me that Oswald worked for naval intelligence, which would make sense. Marines fall under the Navy, right? So I came across some blockbuster revelations yesterday. Of course, they've been out there in the wild for a long time, but I personally never stumbled across them. And basically, what we're dealing with is the notion that there were two Lee Harvey Oswalds, right? And that they did different assignments when they were in the Marines, and they had even, as we'll see, different specialties. The activities of Oswald in the Philippines have been completely glossed over and covered up by the vast majority of Kennedy researchers. Harold Weisberg, who we've talked about before, researcher, former OSS guy, basically he kind of discovered that Lee Oswald, not the Harvey Oswald, Lee Oswald, when he was down in the Philippines, was connected to a very suspicious homicide of a guy named Martin Strand. Rumors had sprung up about Martin Strand and Oswald's potential involvement in his death. And this was a rumor that hung over Oswald's head while he was in the Marines. I'll go ahead and I'll read this little part of a memo dated April 30th, 1964 from the Judge Advocate General of the Navy to the Commandant of the Marine Corps. It says, enclosed are two copies of Private Martin D. Strand, USMC investigation. Mr. J. Lee Rankin, counsel for the President's Commission, inquiring into the circumstances surrounding the assassination of President Kennedy, has requested that certain information be developed by the Department of the Navy. Information elicited from witnesses before the commission has created a rumor to the effect that Lee Harvey Oswald, a former Marine, could be implicated in the death of Private Martin D. Strand, U.S. Marine Corps, on January 5th, 1958 at QB Point, which is in the Philippines. The rumor stems from testimony given by Richard Call and Donald, it says Carnarada, but it's Camarada, former members of the U.S. Marine Corps. Camarada seems to be the one who started this rumor. In an effort to cooperate with the commission to the fullest extent, it is suggested that the following actions be taken. locate and interview Camarada with a view toward determining the basis of foundation of the rumor and whether or not Oswald may or may not have had something to do with it. So this is the weird thing. Camarada started this rumor about Oswald being involved in the death of Martin Strand. And this is really strange because they were down on some sort of guard duty, right? But what were they guarding? They were guarding what's called the crypto van, right? The crypto van. Sounds wild, right? So the crypto van is actually an encrypted radio device of some kind that was super duper top secret. And we learned from the testimony of Oswald's commander, who was Corporal Donovan, that Oswald and the other members of his group, which were only a group of 6, who went to Jacksonville in March, completed the basic Jacksonville aviation training, and then from there went to Biloxi and got done with Biloxi. Started Biloxi on May the 4th and got done with Biloxi on June 18th. This group of 6 all had what's called a crypto clearance, or it's heavily suspected they had a crypto clearance. They had to have a minimum top secret clearance just to be in the unit, but it is not alleged that Oswald had any types of clearance like that. So this event, when Mr. Martin Strand was on guard duty, somebody hears a bang, and they run to him, and they find that he has been shot with his own shotgun under the right armpit. And basically, he's toast. He's dead. And there are no witnesses to it. People get there, and they find him. An investigation is started, and there are all kinds of notes about the people who were there, and there are notes on the description of the body and how it was positioned, where it was positioned, and there are some notes that indicate that this is suspicious and that it would have been impossible for Strand to pull the trigger on himself in a way that he did. Some people believe that the shotgun was dropped, but if you know anything about firearms, a functioning firearm will not go off just because you dropped it. There should never have been a round in the chamber. When you look at the policy on their guard duty and how they handled their shotguns, there were not supposed to be any rounds in the chamber. And the safety was supposed to be on. So how did a bullet or a shotgun shell get into the chamber? Number one. And then go off and kill Private Strand. There's a lot of questions about this. The paperwork appears to show that Lee Oswald is nowhere near the body. He's not there. Nobody sees him. He's not there at all. So why Camarada started the rumor about Oswald being involved with his death, nobody really knows. Oswald was definitely present in his group of 6 who were guarding the crypto van, which means that Oswald had to have had a crypto clearance. These are the conclusions drawn by Weisberg, and I agree with him. The descriptions of this man here, this Lee Harvey Oswald, who is in Colonel Donovan's group of 6, who went through school at Jacksonville and then Biloxi, and then headed to El Toro, and then headed to Atsugi. And this is one continuous group. Donovan was with this Lee Oswald basically from the beginning as his immediate commander. The schedule of this Oswald conflicts with the other Oswald. And as we go through the Marine Corps documentation, we'll see where some of those discrepancies occurred. But this incident with Oswald is it's pretty wild. I had never heard of it before, and most people haven't. This incident and the paperwork attached to it basically show beyond all doubt that Oswald was involved in a unit dealing with encrypted radio signals. Interesting, huh? So, now that I've gotten that out of the way, I'm going to apologize once again to my listeners over at Bloody History World War II, because I'm going to put this episode out today on my Bloody History World War II Substack, because I just haven't had time to do a damn show, and I have to get through this research because it's compelling. It's forcing me to sit here. God, I put a ton of hours into this already. Between compiling the lists of addresses for Marguerite Oswald, that kind of led right into this. So what we're going to do now is we'll come back to this Schrand stuff. We'll do a whole episode on this Martin Schrand stuff. But today we're going to start off on the Marine Corps and the conflicting information we're given about Oswald and the Marines. So this is Marine Corps and the Soviet Union by John Armstrong. It's important to remember that children and young teenagers do not live by themselves. Harvey Oswald and Lee Oswald are no exceptions. The tall, husky, well-built Lee Oswald lived with his tall, nice-looking Marguerite Claverie Oswald mother until joining the Marines in 1956. The short, thin Harvey Oswald lived with a short, heavy-set caretaker who also used the name Marguerite Oswald, but her true identity remains unknown. Harvey lived with this caretaker until joining the Marines in 1956. On July 1st, 1956, the short, heavy-set Marguerite Oswald imposter rented an apartment at 4936 Collinwood in Fort Worth. Her landlady, Mrs. James Taylor, remembered that her two sons lived with her. One of her sons was Harvey Oswald, who remained at this address until he joined the Marines in October. The other son was Robert Oswald, the brother of Lee Oswald. On July 13th, Robert Oswald opened an account at the Westside State Bank, and he used the 4936 Collinwood address as his home address. Robert lived at this address with Harvey and the short, heavy-set caretaker until he married Vada Mercer in November. This was the first and only time that Robert Oswald lived with Harvey and or the short, heavy-set Marguerite Oswald imposter. 6 years earlier, in 1950, Robert had attended the nearby Stripling Junior High School. 4 years later, in the fall of 1954, Harvey Oswald attended Stripling Junior High School. During the next 5 months, while living together at 4936 Collinwood, I believe that Robert Oswald and Harvey discussed their attending Stripling Junior High. After Harvey Oswald defected to Russia in 1959, Robert Oswald told reporters on several occasions that his brother had attended Stripling Junior High. In 1964, Robert Oswald told the Warren Commission that his brother attended Stripling Junior High. Harvey Oswald did attend Stripling. When I met with Ricardo Galindo, the school principal of Stripling in 1995, Mr. Galindo said it was common knowledge that Oswald had attended Stripling. I was soon able to contact and meet former teachers and several classmates who knew Harvey Oswald when he attended Stripling in 1954. Lee Oswald, however, never attended junior high in Fort Worth. In the fall of 1954, Lee Oswald was attending Beauregard Junior High School in New Orleans. In July 1956, the tall, nice-looking Marguerite Oswald, mother of Lee Oswald, quit her job at Goldring's department store. That's in New Orleans. She moved to Fort Worth and for the next 2.5 years lived at apartment number 3 at 3830 West 6th. When the tall, husky Lee Oswald took leave from the Marines on several occasions, he traveled to Fort Worth and he stayed with his mother. At the same time, the Marguerite Oswald imposter was still living at 4936 Collinwood in Fort Worth. On October 15th, 1956, Lee Harvey Oswald was interviewed in preparation for his enlistment in the Marine Corps. He indicates this is Harvey Oswald. His physical appearance was listed as hazel eye color, brown hair, 5'8", 135 pounds. He gave his home address as 4936 Collinwood in Fort Worth, where he lived with Robert Oswald and the short, heavy-set Marguerite imposter. Note, Robert Oswald lived at the Collinwood address with both Harvey Oswald and Marguerite Oswald imposter during the summer and fall of 1956. We know this because Robert opened up a bank account and gave the Collinwood address as his home address. So, Armstrong has a document posted here, front and back sides, which he says is a newly discovered document courtesy Dr. James Norwood. And let me think. This is probably in the early 2000s this document came out. It is an enlistment form for Lee Harvey Oswald. But a couple things jump out here. At the beginning, you can see that it has the last name Oswald, comma, and then it says Lee, and then Harvey for first and middle. But you can see clearly that the first name was typed in as Harvey and was then later erased, and Lee was typed over it. And Lee was typed for the middle name, and that was erased, and Harvey was typed over it. So this is an enlistment form for a Harvey Oswald that was changed to a Lee Harvey Oswald. It has the Collinwood address, which is where the Harvey Oswald was staying. And it has his height listed as 5'8" at 135 pounds. When Oswald joined the Marines, he was 5'10", maybe closer to 5'11", right? That's what we're told. I believe the heights, though, are all obfuscated. When you look at the real Oswald's Marine Corps entry photo, he's clearly 5'9", right? So, I don't know if there was ever a 5'11" Lee Harvey Oswald. And when you flip to the back, it has John Edward Pick, stepbrother, which is not correct. He's actually a half-brother. All right, so let's see some of the notations that John Armstrong made on this. He said, 1, in box 1, the original name given and entered was Harvey Lee Oswald. The original name of Harvey Lee Oswald was erased and replaced with the name of Lee Harvey Oswald. When this was done and who authorized it is unknown. In box 52A, in response to the question, are your parents living? Harvey Oswald said no. And in parentheses, he has, why? At the end of World War II, thousands of orphan children were brought to the United States. One of these orphans was given the name Harvey Oswald and placed with a caretaker, the short, heavy-set Marguerite Oswald imposter, even though Harvey Oswald said his parents were listed as not living. The name Marguerite Claverie Oswald, an address of 4936 Collinwood, appears in box 54. But the tall, nice-looking, well-dressed Marguerite Claverie Oswald, the mother of Lee Oswald, was living at 3830 West 6th Street. The woman living at the Collinwood address was the short, heavy-set Marguerite imposter, the caretaker of Harvey. Number 3, box 52B, in response to the question, are they divorced or separated? Harvey said no. It's doubtful that Harvey Oswald knew the family and marital background of Lee Oswald's mother, Marguerite Claverie Oswald, who by the year 1956 had been married and divorced twice. During the 10 years that Harvey lived with the Marguerite Oswald imposter, this woman was never married, never divorced, nor was she involved in a relationship. Box 53. The name of Robert E. Lee Oswald, deceased, was handwritten and not typed as the father of Lee Harvey Oswald. When and by whom the name Robert E. Lee Oswald was handwritten on this document is unknown. Box 56. The name of John Edward Pick, stepbrother, is listed as first beneficiary. Marine recruit Harvey Oswald could not list the beneficiary as the short, heavy-set Marguerite Oswald because this woman was not his mother. Instead, Harvey Oswald listed the beneficiary as John Edward Pick, his, quote, stepbrother. Harvey and John Pick were not biologically related. However, if the Marine recruit had been Lee Oswald, he would have listed the beneficiary as either Marguerite or John Edward Pick, his half-brother. The name John Edward Pick as beneficiary also raises another question. For the past 6 months, Harvey Oswald had been living at 4936 Collinwood in Fort Worth with the Marguerite Oswald imposter and Robert. Why didn't Harvey Oswald list his supposedly full brother, Robert, as beneficiary? Well, because Harvey and Robert were not related. Box 23 reads, I desire to enlist in the United States Marine Corps for 3 years. However, if we look carefully, we can see the original type read, in parentheses, 24 months AD, meaning 24 months active duty. The information on the medical record shown below was provided by Harvey Oswald when interviewed on October 24th, 1956. Oswald advised that he had a mastoidectomy in 1945 and was hospitalized for 2 weeks. And then he has two medical documents here showing the mastoidectomy. And it says, the information on the 2 USMC enlisted records and the medical records that was provided by Harvey Oswald when interviewed on October 24th, 1956. Both records were dated October 24th, 1956 and signed by Oswald. Harvey Oswald advised that in 1945 he was 6 years old. A mastoidectomy was performed, followed by 2 weeks of hospitalization. Harvey Oswald had a mastoidectomy in 1945. Lee Oswald had a mastoidectomy in 1946 in Harris Hospital in Fort Worth. You know, I came across the mastoidectomy surgery document, neither of these, yesterday, and I would have swore it said that it happened in 1947, but hey, I might be wrong. In 1997, I met with Frank DiBenedetto, Lee Oswald's supervisor at Tujague's in 1955 to 1956. Frank told the HSCA that Oswald worked for Tujague's for a year to a year and a half. After Mr. Tujague died, Frank purchased the company in 1997, and he was in the same office building in the Sandlin building in New Orleans, where he and Oswald worked in 55 and 56. Frank told me that Oswald was his height, about 5'11" and quit Tujague's in late summer 1956, quote, to join the Marines. Lee Oswald's brother, Robert Oswald, was 5'11" and weighed 150 pounds. In September 1959, Lee Oswald's height and weight were listed as 5'11" and 150 pounds on his Marine Corps discharge papers. Lee Oswald's height from 56 to 59 was 5'11". Lee Oswald and brother Robert Oswald are nearly identical in height and weight. An interesting thing happened when the Warren Commission showed Oswald's aunt copies of memoirs handwritten by Lee Oswald from Beauregard Junior High School in New Orleans. Mrs. Moret answered, "I couldn't swear that this was his writing. I think he was left-handed." Next section. Lee Oswald and Harvey Oswald and Alan Feld, October 56 through September of 1957. From Dallas to San Diego for basic training. At 6:05 p.m. on October 24th, 1956, Harvey Oswald and 3 other Marine recruits, Donald Gerald Davis, Please George Scott, and Donald Melvin Elam, boarded an American Airlines flight to San Diego and arrived at 11:45 p.m. Oswald, the 2 young men from Dallas, and a young man from Wisconsin named Alan R. Feld were assigned to platoon 2060. He then has 2 statements here. One is a type statement from the FBI documenting statements from Alan R. Feld, and another one is a typed version of the handwritten notes that Lee Harvey Oswald had. That was found among his possessions, which there's some contradictory information here, which I'll go over, but I'm going to read the beginning of this FBI memo on Feld. It says, Alan R. Feld, 3307 North 22nd, advised that he'd enlisted in the United States Marine Corps at Milwaukee, Wisconsin in October of 1956, and had met Lee Harvey Oswald as a United States Marine Corps recruit about October 23rd, 1956, while both of them were assigned to platoon 2060, 2nd Battalion, NCRD, I can't tell what that is, it's a little smudge, San Diego, California. Both men were stationed at San Diego until January 1957, at which time Feld stated that they were transferred to Camp Pendleton, it's also in San Diego, for combat training. This combat training lasted until May of 1957, and during this time, Feld was assigned to the same squad of 8 men, all of whom shared the same tent. During May of 57, Oswald and Feld were transferred to the A&P school at Jacksonville, Florida, and in approximately July of 1957, they were both sent to Aviation Electronics School in Memphis, Tennessee. During September of 1957, Feld transferred to the Marine Corps Air Station at Opelika and did not see Oswald after that date. So Robert Oswald also worked at Opelika. And Opelika in 1953 and 1954 was run by the CIA, who were trying to overthrow, who the fuck were they trying to overthrow this time? Arbenz in Guatemala. So when Robert Oswald transferred to Opelika, he was working with the CIA. That's clear. Feld probably was working with the CIA at this time. After Arbenz, I believe they were using it to. It became the Mongoose, Operation Mongoose headquarters at Opelika, which Robert Oswald worked at, right? Prior to Mongoose. Coincidence? I think not. David Ferry and those guys connected to Mongoose, right? All right, let me continue with this statement here. During his association with Oswald, Feld recalled that Oswald continually discussed politics, in which none of the young Marines had any interest. Oswald was an argumentative type of person and would frequently take opposite sides of an argument just for the sake of debate. Oswald was not popular with the other recruits, and his company was to be avoided if possible. According to Feld, Oswald continually wrote to United States senators about certain issues in which Oswald believed strongly but were not known to Feld. One senator in particular who was in receipt of a number of Oswald's letters was Senator Thurman. Feld remembered that Oswald had expressed a dislike for people of wealth and that he championed the cause of the working man. On frequent occasions, Oswald found fault with Eisenhower and Truman and had been against the United States' participation in the Korean War, since Oswald stated that 1 million men were killed in this war and nothing was accomplished. Oswald had condemned Eisenhower because Eisenhower's poor tactics in the utilization of a tank unit at the time of the invasion of Europe. So this person who went through the Marine training and radar school with Feld was like he was obviously a politically minded person, right? But we have all the statements about the other Oswald who said that he was not a politically minded person. All right, so let me read some of this statement from Oswald that was found amongst is considered his handwritten autobiography. Now, parts of his statement are just fucking wrong. They're lies. Like, this Oswald never went to Biloxi. It's impossible for him to have gone to Biloxi. And I'll show you why. In his statements here, he confirms Feld's schedule. So he says, I served in the U.S. Marine Corps from October 56 to September of 59, during which time I served in San Diego, California, October 56, April 60, Camp Pendleton, and then April to May 1957, and then Jacksonville, Florida, May to June 1957. That's identical to what Feld said. Feld said that he joined the Marines with him, and they were together all through basic training at Camp Pendleton. Then they went to Jacksonville. And this is where Oswald's statement diverges. Oswald then says he goes to Santa Ana, California from June to August of 57, and then Japan in August of 57 to November of 58. Santa Ana El Toro base, December 1958 to September 1959. So there's a couple things wrong here. After he has all those dates outlined, there's then the next paragraph that says, my stay in the Far East included 8 months in Japan from September 57 to November of 57, and from May to October of 1958. During December 57 to May 58, I was stationed at Subic Bay near Manila, Philippines Island. So it says during December 57 to May of 58, I was stationed at Subic Bay near the Philippine Islands. I'm just trying to correlate these dates here. So he's saying he was there for a long time, from May to October of 58. That's interesting because the shooting that occurred with Martin Strand occurred in January of 58. Where does he say he was in January of 58? He says he was in Santa Ana, California, June to August of 57, which is not correct as per Feld. Feld says that they, from there, went to Aviation Electronics School. He said in July they went to Aviation Electronics School, which would be directly after Jacksonville, Florida, right? So Harvey Oswald in this memo here says he went to Jacksonville, Florida, and then from May to June of 57, which is correct. But then he lies. He says he goes to Santa Ana, California, June to August of 57, which is totally not correct. I don't believe he's ever seen there in June to August of 57. He's not seen there again until late 58, early 59, when he's transferred back to the Leiden Air Base. So this is false. And it says, and in Japan, August 57 to November 58. And then he talks about El Toro Air Base, but he wasn't at El Toro. He was at the Leiden Air Base. Well, let me walk that back a little bit. It kind of says in a couple places that Oswald had been at both. So at some point in time, he'd been at both. He says, I then served in electronics school, Jacksonville, Florida, and radar school in Biloxi, Mississippi. But he didn't do radar school in Biloxi. Lee Oswald did radar school in Biloxi, and he did it at a time that this Oswald was clearly in Jacksonville, not only stated here by Oswald himself, but by Feld. Alan R. Feld says they went to Jacksonville from May to June 1957. So we have two matching statements here. But Oswald's statement obviously includes lies about Biloxi. There's no date. There's no date in his little chronology here to accompany the time that he was at Biloxi, right? And we can prove absolutely he was at Biloxi and graduated June 18th, 1957. So, yeah, Feld, once again, another witness that dumps cold water on the official story. Alan Feld told the FBI that in November and December of 56 and January 57, he and Lee Harvey Oswald were in basic training, and that's at Camp Pendleton. There are no documents or witnesses that reported contact with Lee Oswald in boot camp or infantry training in 1956 or 57. There is, however, a report that in October 1956, Lee Oswald was assigned to the Marine Corps Air Facility at El Toro, California, 7 miles southeast of Santa Ana and 45 miles north of San Diego. At the same time, Harvey Oswald and Alan Feld were in San Diego. Another report places Lee Oswald at the Marine Corps base at El Toro in June of 1956. Sergeant Wallace Rasberger met Lee Oswald and said that he was either a private first class or a private. Ransberger said that Oswald's duties were to furnish repair parts for vehicles and generators to a unit to which Oswald was assigned. A year later, Ransberger was associated with Lee Oswald in Japan. January 57, Harvey Oswald, Alan Feld, and Lee Oswald at Camp Pendleton, California. In January 57, after boot camp, Alan Feld told the FBI that he and Harvey Oswald were transferred to Camp Pendleton for infantry training, which lasted until May of 1957. Oswald and Feld shared a tent together with 6 other Marine recruits. Harvey Oswald wrote in his biography, underlined in red, that's the document we went over before, that he was at Camp Pendleton until May of 1957. Feld told the FBI that Oswald continually discussed politics, championed the cause of the working man, and was left-winged. From October 1956 through May of 57, Feld and Harvey Oswald were together for 26 weeks. In early 1957, Sergeant Donald Goodwin supervised a 20-man communications group in the 5th Marine Division at Camp Pendleton, one of whom was Private First Class Lee Oswald. Goodwin said that Lee Oswald was a radio communicator, but could not remember if he was a CW operator or a voice communicator. Goodwin also recalled that Oswald either owned an automobile or had the use of an automobile, and spent a great deal of time and effort reupholstering this vehicle. While Harvey Oswald and Alan Feld were in infantry training at Camp Pendleton, Private First Class Lee Oswald was a radio communicator at the large jet base in El Toro. See, here's another clue that this is correct. The radio communicator is not allegedly what Oswald was. Oswald was supposed to be a radar operator. From going over the documents, it appears as though you have Aviation Fundamental School, which is always in Jacksonville, and then you can take the radar school and the radio communication school. It's actually considered aviation control, so it's radar and radio. You can do that in Biloxi, or you could do it in Memphis. I actually looked this up and I found the location that Oswald allegedly went to, the training base in Memphis, Tennessee, where Oswald never mentions it. The historical record never mentions it, but it would totally make sense that he took his radar and radio training in Memphis because there's no documentation of him having done it at any other time anywhere else. March to April 57, Harvey Oswald at Camp Pendleton, California, and Lee Oswald at Aviation Fundamental School in Jacksonville, Florida. So we've already covered the fact that Oswald was at Camp Pendleton until May of 1957. However, we have documentation that Lee Oswald entered Aviation Fundamental School in Jacksonville, Florida on March 25th, 1957, and graduated on May the 2nd, and his new order for duties came on May 3rd, which means he had to be in Biloxi on May 4th. Lee Harvey Oswald well known and documented to have caught a train from Jacksonville to Biloxi, where he shows up on the 4th, and he is then, when he graduates in June 18th, he's photographed by the school. And you can clearly see that it's Lee Oswald, not Harvey Oswald, in the photograph. While Harvey Oswald and Alan Feld were stationed at Camp Pendleton in California, January to May of 1957, Lee Oswald began attending Aviation Fundamental School in Jacksonville, Florida, on March 25th, 1957. He graduated on May 2nd and was ranked 46th in a class of 54. May through June 57, Lee Oswald and Eddie Feld in Jacksonville, Florida, Lee Oswald in Biloxi, Mississippi. Alan Feld told the FBI that in May of 57, he and Harvey Oswald left Camp Pendleton, California. They were assigned to the Naval Air Station in Jacksonville, Florida, and attended A and P classes, that's airframe and power plant, in May and June of 1957. Harvey Oswald wrote in his biography that he was in Jacksonville, Florida in May and June of 1957. That's the note above, underlined in blue. Marine Corps Unit Diary, number 104-57 and 102-528, confirmed that on May 2nd, 1957, Feld and Oswald were at the Aviation Fundamental School in Jacksonville, Florida. Information contained in the Marine Corps Unit Diaries are the names of Marines, their rank and serial numbers at a particular location on a daily basis. Marine Corps diaries that listed the name of Lee Harvey Oswald were withheld from the public until 1997. Harvey Oswald and Alan Feld left Camp Pendleton and arrived in Jacksonville, Florida on May 2nd, 1957. The next day, May 3rd, 1957, Lee Oswald boarded a train in Jacksonville, Florida en route to Biloxi, Mississippi. Sergeant Daniel Patrick Powers supervised a group of 6 Marines that included himself, Edward J. Bandoni, James M. Brereton, Donald P. Camarada. Remember, Camarada is the one who will later throw Oswald under the bus when he is accused or rumored to have been involved in the death of Martin Strand. Martin Strand is also in this group of 6, along with Lee Oswald, and this group arrived on May 4th in Biloxi. This group will travel together back to El Toro and then to Atsugi, Japan, where they leave on August the 15th. Their supervisor was Sergeant Daniel Patrick Powers. I have the testimony of Daniel Patrick Powers. We're going to go over it, probably not today. But Powers it's very fascinating. A fascinating testimony. All right, and then we have a photo here of this course, graduation date, June 18th, 57. It is the ATC&W department, the AC&W operators. That's aircraft control and communication or something along those lines. And it is class 24047, course 27330. So, as usual, when you go over Oswald's Marine records, they merged a lot of this information. So you'll find this stuff and a lot of this stuff merged into Oswald's records. You do find some discrepancies in those mergings, though. You also find mergings in the writings of Oswald, because Oswald, obviously, when he wrote out his schedule for his biography, obviously he accounted for all his dates and times until he was discharged from the Marines. But then he says he was in Biloxi when he was obviously not in Biloxi. But this photograph, I think, is a very important photograph, showing that Lee Oswald, with the fat neck, graduated 6/18/57. In May and June 57, while Harvey Oswald and Alan Feld were at the Aviation Fundamental School in Jacksonville, Florida, the group of 6 Marines attended radar school in Biloxi, Mississippi from May 4th to June 18th. Above is their graduation photo taken on June 18th with 6 Marines dressed in fatigues standing on either side of Air Force personnel in dress uniforms. Lee Oswald then took leave from the Marines from June 20th to June 30th, 1957. His leave was remembered by Marguerite Clavery Oswald's neighbor, Lee McCracken, who lived at 3830 West 6th in Fort Worth. And I double-checked these dates, and on his official calendar, it is definitely marked that he's on personal leave. And I actually read the statement of Mr. Lee McCracken, and he said that Oswald returned to this address 2 or 3 times while he was on various leaves over the time that he was in the Marines, which is funny because the other Oswald, Harvey Oswald, wasn't visiting the 3830 West 6th address. He was going to the Collinwood address when he was on leave. Interesting, huh? July 1st, 57, the group of 6 Marines, including Lee Oswald, departed Biloxi and arrived at the Marine Corps Air Station in El Toro. Sergeant Powers said they were supposed to report for duty on or before July 12th. Lee Oswald reported for duty on July 9th, was given a medical examination, and listed his mother's address as 3038 West 6th in Fort Worth the following day. Wait a minute, it's 3830, sorry, 3830 Fort Worth the following day. He was issued an immunization certificate, July 10th, 57, and once again listed his mother's address at 3830 West 6th in Fort Worth. On July 1st, 57, the short, heavy-set Marguerite imposter moved from 4936 Collinwood in Fort Worth to 1031 West 5th in Fort Worth without paying her past due utility bill. Now, the 1031 address is not in the official story at all, but we know it exists, and this is how. Mrs. James Taylor, her former landlady, visited her at 1031 West 5th and presented her with the utility bills. The short, heavy-set Marguerite Oswald imposter refused to pay for the past due bills, just like she had done in New Orleans when she moved out of 126 Exchange Place. It is important to know and remember, there's no record of employment for the short, heavy-set Marguerite Oswald imposter in Fort Worth from June 56 to August of 57. Her last known address in Fort Worth in July and August 57 was 1031 West 5th. In September 1957, Marguerite Oswald imposter left Fort Worth and moved to the upscale Hotel Senator in New Orleans. So we have here's the thing. The FBI really tried to squash the information that was coming out of Pfister Dental Lab and Touget's in as far as the dates that Oswald allegedly worked there. So here in particular, we have a correlation through the addresses, right? Because we have the documentation of the 1031 West 5th address based on their screw-ups. And we know that she moved in September of 57 out of that address, or August of 57. So here we are in 1957, not 1955, okay? And it is this time where the Palmer McBride story comes into play. And Palmer McBride claims to have been working with Harvey Oswald in late 57 and then early 58. He also says that they were together when Sputnik launched, and in early 58 they started attending meetings of the astronomy club led by Mr. William Wolfe. And when Wolfe was interviewed and other people from the astronomy club were interviewed, all of them agreed that it was 57 and 58 because of the location that they had the meetings. They didn't start having the meetings at this certain house until 1958. And this house is where the meetings took place that Oswald allegedly visited. So the FBI will tell you that this was in 1956, not 1958. But they're wrong. They lied, and this is additional evidence that the Warren Commission and the FBI documents have been altered. All right, so continuing on. In June 57, Harvey Oswald and Alan Feld completed the Aviation Fundamental School in Jacksonville, May and June of 1957. In July, they were transferred to the Naval Air Technical Training Center in Millington, Tennessee, Memphis, a 3,000-acre facility with 13,000 personnel. They attended courses in aviation electronics and may have attended courses in radar. I believe that's exactly what they did, because Armstrong tries to figure out when this guy went to radar school, but I think he misinterprets. I believe that the radar school was at Memphis. On August 21st, 57, while Harvey Oswald was at the Naval Air Station in Memphis with a group of 6 Marines from the radar school, including Lee Oswald, boarded the USS Bexar in San Diego, California. The next day, the ship left San Diego en route to Japan. All right, so August 21st, Harvey Oswald is at the Naval Air Station in Memphis still, because they got there in July, and it's a 6-week course. So he's still there August 21st. However, it says here the next day, the ship left San Diego en route to Japan. That's the USS Bexar. I have multiple documents saying that the ship actually left on August 15th. So that might be a little bit of a contradiction here, or maybe Armstrong was wrong. When the ship stopped in Honolulu, Hawaii, Lee Oswald mailed a postcard to his mother, who lived at 3830 West 5th in Fort Worth. So we know that this is the same person who was visiting the 3830 address, who stopped in Honolulu, who was on the USS Bexar. There's no record of what ship the other Oswald took. Harvey Oswald and Alan Feld remained at the Naval Air Training Center in Memphis until September of 57. Feld was then transferred to Opelika, Florida, where the CIA managed logistics for propaganda, psychological warfare, sabotage, and Cuban rebel forces. Alan Feld's 10-month association with Harvey Oswald and their assignments together in San Diego, Camp Pendleton, Jacksonville, and the Naval Air Technical Training Center in Millington, Tennessee, conflicted with the whereabouts of Lee Oswald at the same time. Note, the Marines who attended Aviation Electronics School in Memphis, Tennessee in July, August, and September 57 with Harvey and Feld are very important but unknown to researchers and never mentioned by the FBI, Secret Service, Warren Commission, HSCA, or ARB. Alan Feld's 11-month association with Harvey Oswald clearly conflicts with the known whereabouts of Lee Oswald during the same time period. By closely following the movements and whereabouts of Harvey Oswald and Alan Feld from October 56 through September of 57, we now realize there was no time for Harvey Oswald to have attended radar school in Biloxi. Yet we know that Harvey Oswald worked in a radar bubble for 10 months with Nelson Delgado at MAX 9 in Santa Ana from October 58 through August of 59. Therefore, Harvey Oswald must have attended radar school somewhere, but when and where? So I think he's misinterpreting. He obviously did that at Memphis. In 1998, researcher William Weston interviewed former Marine Sherman Cooley, who said he, Daniel Powers, and Nelson Delgado were in platoon 1068, and that Lee Oswald was either in platoon 1069 or 1070. Okay, so we have a major problem here because I went through Daniel Powers' testimony yesterday, and Powers denies knowing Delgado. Okay, so there's a mistake here in William Weston's research coming from Sherman Cooley. So Powers didn't know Nelson Delgado at all. And the statements he gives about the Lee Oswald that we know says he says that he had heard rumors that he had been speaking Russian, but he didn't know anything about him studying Russian or speaking Russian or none of that stuff, none of the communist shit at all. Note, it would be helpful to locate Marine Corps yearbooks for the year 57, platoons 1069 and 1070, and look for a photo of Lee Oswald. Cooley explained that Marines from platoons in the 1000 series, 1001 to 1999, attended radar school a week or two before or a week or two after Marines from platoons in the 2000 series. We know that Lee Oswald was platoon 1069 or 1070. Powers and Delgado were platoon 1068. Now, that's a mistake because Powers doesn't know Delgado. They attended radar school in Biloxi from May 4th to June 18th. Therefore, if Harvey Oswald and Alan Feld, platoon 2060, attended radar school in Biloxi, then it was a week or two before. See, what Armstrong's trying to do is he's trying to figure out where the hell this guy went to radar school if they weren't at the same school at the same time. And again, it was in Memphis. Memphis is a full-service training facility that has all aspects of aviation training. So the idea that it was anywhere else is ridiculous. All right, then it says the Folsom Exhibit Number 1, published by the Warren Commission, shows the class for course 27330 at Biloxi Radar School convened on April 24th, 57. However, on April 24th, Lee Oswald was not in Biloxi. Lee Oswald was attending Aviation Fundamental School in Jacksonville, Florida. So let me comment on this. There is another document that we have that shows that this radar course started on April 24th of 1957. And so what Armstrong is doing is he's trying to correlate the statement from Cooley that the 1000 and 2000 series started a couple of weeks apart with this April 24th date, which would be a couple of weeks apart from the May 4th start date of Lee's class, right? But that wouldn't make any sense to me. That wouldn't make sense to me at all. Because this April 24th date, you still have that Oswald down at El Toro before he's being sent to Jacksonville to do the basic aviation training. And I think they would give you the basic aviation training prior to giving you any advanced radar or radio training. I mean, that would make sense, right? They got to teach you the basics before they teach you the advanced stuff. So to me, it's obvious that he took the radar courses at Memphis. Here we have another document. I haven't found this document in particular, but I'm sure it exists. An FBI teletype states Lee Harvey Oswald graduated from radar school on May 27th, 1957, with 4 other Marines. But Lee Oswald graduated from radar school on May 18th and was on leave through June 30th. Is it possible that Harvey Oswald and Feld began attending radar school in Biloxi on April 24th, 57, instead of attending the A&P school as reported by Alan Feld? You see, he's calling his witness into question, right? You don't want to do that unless you have slam dunk evidence that Feld is wrong or incorrect or that there was a third Oswald. then you have to accept Feld's statement at face value, especially when it's supported by the statements of Oswald, even though Oswald lies in the subsequent statements, right? So verifying people's statements and whether they're true or not is complicated. It requires corroboration or a relevant and likely place in the storyline. So yeah, I haven't seen this teletype that says May 27th, 57 with 4 other Marines, but I don't know what they're talking about. Remember, that's an FBI teletype. That is not a Marine Corps document, so someone could have been wrong. Harvey Oswald and Lee Oswald both attended radar school, and the Folsom Exhibit No. 1 and the FBI teletype may provide the dates as to when Harvey Oswald attended. Lee Oswald was assigned to the Shipping and Receiving Section, Keesler Air Force Base, but the school record published by the Warren Commission shows that Oswald was assigned to the 1st Armor Amphibian Company, U.S. Marine Corps Gulfport, Mississippi, in response to a 1987 FOIA filed by Emory Brown Jr. The Marine Corps advised Oswald's attachment to the Armory Company was administrative in nature and only for record purposes. They further advised the Armor Company only maintained records for their own personnel. In other words, Marines like Harvey Oswald attached to Armor Company could attend radar school in Biloxi or anywhere, but their school records would be held and maintained by the U.S. Marine Corps in Gulfport. So he's still trying to make excuses for where the hell Harvey Oswald went to radar school, but he's stupid. This is retarded. He obviously took it at Memphis. All right, September 1957, Lee Oswald in Japan. On August 22nd, 1957, Lee Oswald boarded the USS Bexar en route to Japan. Remember, I got a document that says the 15th, so it might be the 15th. The ship stopped in Honolulu for one day. Lee Oswald mailed a postcard to his tall, nice-looking mother addressed to 3830 West 6th in Fort Worth. Lee Oswald wrote, "Well, only one day here, but I've been having a lot of fun. 12 more days at sea to Japan. Love, Lee." The postcard was mailed on August 31st, 57 from Honolulu. During the 3-week voyage, Sergeant Powers and Lee Oswald often spent hours together playing chess. Warren Commission Attorney Jenner asked Powers if Oswald studied Russian, had sympathy for communist principles or Marxist doctrines, or listened to classical music. Powers replied no to all of these questions. The USS Bexar arrived in Japan on September 12, 1957, where Lee Oswald was assigned to MACS-1. So I think Armstrong contradicts himself with the classical music thing and the playing chess thing. Who did he say? Powers? Maybe it was Donovan who did that stuff with him. But see, this is where we start to get in some weird conflicts when he says that he wasn't into the classical music or all that stuff. So, note, Lee Oswald's tall, nice-looking mother lived in apartment 3 of a small 4-unit apartment building at 3830 West 6th in Fort Worth, adjacent to Lee McCracken, who lived in apartment number 2. McCracken told the FBI Lee Oswald visited his tall, nice-looking mother at the apartment during 2 or 3 military leaves. Marine Corps records show Oswald took leave in February 57, June 57, and November-December of 58. In 1995, I met and spoke with Zach Stout, who was living in El Dorado, Kansas. Zach was a fellow Marine who remembered the day Lee Oswald arrived in Japan. He and Oswald became close friends and worked together every day for the next 10 months in the radar bubble in Atsugi, the Philippines' Subic Bay, aboard a ship, and were sometimes together while on Liberty. Liberty is leave. Lee was assigned to bunk on the first level of Barracks Number 5, a large 2-story wood frame building that housed 72 men. Oswald slept in the upper bunk, and he shared it with Robert Ogg, who slept in the lower bunk. I asked Zach if Oswald spoke or practiced speaking Russian in Japan. Zach answered, "Where do people come up with these stupid ideas? That's ridiculous. No, he never spoke Russian or had a Russian book or a Russian newspaper. If he had any of those things, all of us would have known about it." So Zach Stout is one of the men who was with him at the shooting of Martin Strand down in in the Philippines on the first week of January in 58. So Stout was definitely with the guy who was the radio operator and didn't speak Russian. Another Marine who knew Lee Oswald in Japan was Richard Bullock. Bullock remembers that Ozzy was not in the radar section, but was a radio communicator. Some of you may recall that Sergeant Donald Goodwin, who knew Lee Oswald at Camp Pendleton, also remembered that Oswald was known as a radio communicator. And that's true. I have both of these documents. Well, I don't have Bullock's statement because the FBI didn't take one from him, but I have Donald Goodwin's. And his statement, do I have it right here? No, I'd have to dig for it. But the statement of Donald Goodwin clearly states that Oswald was in a radio unit, not in a radar unit. But remember, the training happened at the same time. But being a radio operator and taking advanced courses in encrypted radio, is what required the crypto clearance that Weisberg had identified Oswald had to be in that unit. All right, continuing on. I spoke with Mr. Bullock several times for several hours on the telephone. Bullock knew Lee Oswald as Ozzy, and he said he was not the guy I saw in the picture on TV who was shot by Jack Ruby. Bullock looked at a color mugshot of Lee Harvey Oswald taken shortly after he was taken into custody by the police, and he said, it looks nothing like him. That's not the man I knew. The man I knew was 30 to 40 pounds heavier, 3 to 4 inches taller than the man accused of killing President Kennedy. And then there's an article here. Click to see researcher William Kelly's meeting with Mr. Bullock. So Mr. Bullock's interview by Mr. William Kelly is here in this. I'll put the link to this in the show notes. And here again, we have pictures. We have a picture of 1956, Harvey Oswald at Arlington Heights High School in Fort Worth. 1957, Lee Oswald in the Marine Corps. 58, Lee Oswald on Marine leave, photographed by Robert Oswald. And then November 63, Harvey Oswald in police custody. Again, clearly not the same person at all. The first photo on the left above is of Harvey Oswald, 1 month before he joined the Marines. Harvey went through boot camp, basic training at Camp Pendleton, California, A&P school in Jacksonville, and courses at the Naval Technical Center in Millington, Tennessee. The second photo of the tall, husky, well-built Lee Oswald was taken by his friend George Wilkins shortly after he arrived in Japan. Lee was in Japan, the South China Sea, the Philippines, and returned to the United States on November 3rd, 58. After taking leave in December of 58, Lee Oswald was assigned to the Marine Corps Air Facility at El Toro. The third photo is of Lee Oswald taken by his brother Robert in 1958, from late October 58 to September of 1959. Harvey, the fourth photo, was assigned to the Lighterton Air Station at the facility at Santa Ana, California. On October 27, 1957, only 6 weeks after arriving in Japan, Lee Oswald accidentally shot himself in his left arm. Richard Sear, CYR, was standing about 15 yards from the barracks and heard what sounded like a gunshot inside the building. I met with Mr. Sear at his home in Rhode Island, and we discussed his memories of Lee Oswald. Sear said that after hearing a gunshot, he and other Marines ran into the barracks and found Lee Oswald sitting in his locker with a nickel-plated Derringer laying nearby on the floor. Oswald, with a little emotion, said, "It seems as though I have shot myself." Lee Oswald was taken to the U.S. Navy Hospital in nearby Yokosuka, where a Navy surgeon closed his wound and allowed the slug, which lay near the surface on the backside of Oswald's upper left arm, to remain in his arm. A week later, the doctor made an incision on the backside of Oswald's left arm, removed the slug, and closed the wound with stitches. The shooting resulted in 2 scars, Lee Oswald's left arm above his elbow. However, in 1963, neither of these scars were noted by Dr. Earl Rose, who performed the autopsy on Harvey Oswald after he was killed by Jack Ruby in 1963. Harvey did not have scars on his upper left arm from a gunshot wound. Lee Oswald had these scars. Numerous scars on the body of Lee Oswald were not found on the body of Harvey Oswald, noted during the autopsy. The Marines, who knew the tall, husky Lee Oswald, said that he had never talked about communism, was not interested in politics, never studied or spoke a foreign language, occasionally got into fights, and was always drinking. Peter Cassisi said that Oswald came back from leave several times completely drunk, and Jerry Pitts recalled one night when Oswald was passed out drunk in the parking lot next to the barracks. Pitts, along with Pete Connor, said that Lee Oswald hated the term Harv or Harvey and would fight anyone who persisted in calling him by either of those names. 3 years earlier in Beauregard Junior High, Harvey Oswald told his homeroom teacher to always call him Harvey. Lee Oswald wanted to be called Lee. Harvey Oswald wanted to be called Harvey. And that brings us to the next section, October 57, Harvey Oswald and the short, heavy-set Marguerite Oswald imposter in New Orleans. So, according to Armstrong and the witnesses, including Palmer McBride, Harvey Oswald leaves the Marines and goes back to New Orleans, and he's there for a long time. He's there for months, until late 57. So he gets done with the schooling in Memphis since September, and it would appear as though he then is back in New Orleans, seen by Palmer McBride, seen at the New Orleans Astronomers Club, and also Armstrong has a flyer here on the website for the New Orleans Opera House Association. Renato Cellini, general director and conductor. Boris Godunov, Thursday, October 10th, 1957, and Saturday, October 12th, 1957. This was the Opera House 1957-1958 season. Palmer McBride states that they went to one of these two productions, so it had to have been in October of 1957. In October of 57, Lee Oswald was in the hospital at Atsugi because he shot himself. He was there for like 2.5 weeks. All the while, Harvey Oswald's working at the Pfister Dental Lab. And of course, I've already gone over all the documents. The FBI, the Warren Commission, they altered all those statements. When you get into but we have the tax documents reference those. And again, they're obviously fakes. Armstrong found when he had them analyzed that all the tax documents, regardless of company, regardless of city, regardless of date, right? You have different companies, different people working there. You should have different typeset on the tax documents. But no, all of Oswald's tax documents were typed on the same typewriter, meaning they're fakes. This is how the OSS got busted faking documents during World War II. Because they had communications allegedly from the Nazis, sent from 12 different fucking countries, all typed on the same typewriter, right? So these dumb shits, they didn't learn. They didn't learn at all. So, but we're going to call it here today, and we're going to pick up here. What day is today? It's Friday. We're going to pick up here on Monday. I'm going to spend the whole weekend researching this damn stuff because it's fascinating, and researching Martin Strand. But to my listeners at Bloody History World War II, I will be back with a show for you guys on Monday. I hope you've enjoyed this show, and I hope that you tune into my podcast, Corey Hughes Bloody History. And that will do it for me today. I will see you guys tomorrow. I mean Monday. Or whenever. Fuck. Thanks.